If your agency is still doing discovery calls with your prospects, you are actively adding friction into your sales process. I mean, this is how it typically goes, right? A prospect steps into Zoom, they spend the better part of 15 minutes getting peppered by budget and authority and timeline, all of those questions, whether or not they can make a decision, when they're going to make a decision, all of those things, so that the agency can prepare a proposal, and then they spend the next 30 minutes getting pitched by the agency in a way that is unwanted, unnecessary, ill-timed, and all of those things, right? And then when they step out of that discovery call, which they can't wait to get out of, then they spend the better part of 2 weeks ghosting the agency and never replying, and then that process never moves forward. A few years ago, we made the decision to kill discovery calls here at Predictive ROI. Instead, we do what we call help me understand. And that's what I'm going to share with you here, because when your prospects leave a help me understand conversation with you, instead of ghosting you, they're going to thank you. Hi, I'm Stephen Wessner, CEO of Predictive ROI, and in this video, I'm going to peel back the curtain. We're going to walk through the help me understand process from start to finish. I'm going to show you the framework. I'm going to show you the questions. We're going to work through maybe a couple of different scenarios. I'll be back with that in just a few minutes. And because we want you to be able to take this process, take the help me understand, so that you can kill discovery calls at your agency and start running a better process, because not only will your prospects thank you, but you will start to establish and build trust from that very first session, as opposed to feeling the friction and the barriers being put up and being obstacles in your way. All right, so let's dive in. So I just mentioned trust barriers, I just mentioned obstacles, I just mentioned friction in your sales process. So I feel like I need to give you a little bit more of a, let's call it an origin story as to why, not only that I believe that to be true, but I want to give you some data to actually show what's going on. In a previous video, I mentioned this term, trust recession. Now, that's not something that we came up with. And one of the data sources that we pay very, very close attention to, and I promise this contributes directly into the sales process and why I think you should absolutely kill discovery calls and why it's adding friction into your sales process. So if you've not yet downloaded and studied the 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer, I highly encourage you to do so. One, it's a free study, and Edelman has been doing it for years and years, and 26 to be in fact. And one of the things that I absolutely love, not just the findings and the depth of the findings and the insights that they share, but how significant the study is from a respondent in country's perspective. So for example, 28 countries and almost 34,000 respondents. So this is not a small survey. This is not a casual collection of opinions. This is at scale, and they've been doing it now for, as you can see, 26 years. They have been studying the word trust and the topic of trust. And so this is coming right out of the 2026 study. So when you download it, you can see that scale. The point is they've been doing it at scale, studying trust at scale for nearly 3 decades. And so it is a very reliable source of data as it relates to trust. And so one of the biggest findings in the 2026 study, in my opinion, one of my biggest takeaways, is the fact that we're seeing people go at a global scale, go from polarization to grievance down now into insularity, which means there's this reluctance to trust anyone who is different from you. So, in my opinion, coming back then into the sales process, when we step in with discovery calls and we're peppering our prospects with all of these questions that candidly are self-serving for the agency, it puts you in a bad position. It inserts friction into the sales process. Instead, what I want you to do, yes, we're going to walk through the help me understand process in full transparency in just a minute. But what I want you to do is shift your mindset and follow Edelman's advice to be a trust broker. I want you to think about the what, I want you to think about the how, and I want you to think about the who. I believe that your job is to broker trust, that when you're stepping into that first interaction, that first conversation, the first time that you have an opportunity to learn about your prospects' vital priorities, the roadblocks, the things that are in their way between what they want to accomplish and what their current state is. Your goal is to broker trust, is to build trust in that first conversation so they see you as their ally, that you are their Sherpa, that you are their guide, that you are their navigator. Okay, so if all of this is starting to feel a little bit overwhelming, and I typically share this during our mini intensives, I share this during our videos, please give yourself the grace. Yes, maybe you're running discovery calls right now, and yes, maybe they do feel like a lot of friction, and maybe they do feel like, sort of hand-to-hand combat a bit in those conversations. Okay, set that aside. Give yourself the grace to walk away from that process and give yourself the grace to learn something new. All right, so let's think about this from a strategic perspective. You may have seen this before. This is what we call the in-demand agency method. There are 3 different strategies that we focus on here at Predictive: growing the audience so that you can own your addressable market, nurture so you know who to talk to and when, and then sell so that you own a sales process that delivers the result outcomes that you're looking for. So where does the help me understand, where does that fit? And then also, where does the trust piece fit that we were just looking at? So when you're doing this with excellence over here on Nurture, you can see it right there, building trust at scale. Now, this video, we're not going to be breaking down how to build trust at scale through content and through your transitional moments and so forth. We'll do that in a different video, but I just want you to see how the trust piece also impacts the sales process. So here, and then it connects over into here, the actual sales process. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today as the initial stage in what we call the trust architecture. So the help me understand is the first stage in the trust architecture. You may have heard from me before where I broke down the trust architecture, either in a podcast or a different video, but there are 3 stages, 3 sessions, if you will, in the trust architecture. Sometimes I refer to those as bricks, where we're talking about sort of the construction metaphor. The first stage or the first session in the trust architecture is the help me understand. Before you leave the help me understand, you're going to gain permission to schedule the second session, which is called the align and prescribe. And before you leave the align and prescribe session, you're going to get permission to schedule the final session, which is called meet and greet. And the goal of the help me understand, aside from scheduling the align and prescribe, but it's to build trust in that very first conversation and do the absolute opposite of the typical discovery call that adds friction. This process is going to remove friction from that new relationship, the new budding relationship. So we're going to take a quick look at the framework, and then I'm going to slice this apart in varying levels of context. So the help me understand framework, you can see at a high level, we're asking 5 categories. Let me rephrase. We're asking questions inside 5 different categories. Okay, so when you rinse and repeat this process and you do it over and over and over again, and so you get better and better at it, you'll see that, okay, these are 5 categories of questions. And what they're going to do is they're going to set you up for excellence to really demonstrate your expertise, your knowledge about the prospect, and the knowledge about their industry, the niche that you serve, as well as you're going to be demonstrating your business acumen throughout this entire process. Okay, so first the categories. Who do you help? Specifically, this is you asking the prospect, who do you help? What problems do you solve? How does it work, right? So this is you now interviewing your prospective client, right? You're not interrogating your prospective client, you're interviewing, you're asking a lot of great business questions. Then, what are your vital priorities between now and the end of the year? I typically like to say now within the next, at the end of the year, between now and the next 12 months, between now and the next 18 months, and then the issues, what are the roadblocks in the way? Okay, so that's the framework. So just tap the brakes for just a second on the framework And let me shift gears a little bit more about the why. So we talked a little bit about the trust recession, the Edelman data, what your audience needs to hear from you in order to have some trust built before they step into a conversation with you. Then you're going to be flipping the script, changing the game right away. They're expecting a discovery call, and that's not what you're doing. You're doing a help me understand instead. So now all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I was expecting to be interrogated, and now we're actually having a great business conversation. This is feeling really, really good. So let me take you behind the curtain, if you will, a little bit into the point of view here at Predictive. We believe that our goal is to be a navigator for our clients, right? So this is just coming right out of one of the, presentations, if you will, that we share with our clients further down the stages of the trust architecture. So you can see up here, our goal is to help agencies, move from guesswork to growth so they can reach their goals faster. And we do that by positioning ourselves as navigators. And I want you to think about this too, that when your prospects step into a help me understand with you, they're going to want from you too. They don't want to get pitched. They don't want to get sold. They don't want to be interrogated. They don't want high pressure sales. They want to spend time with someone who understands their business, both at a high level above the waterline, as well as at a under the waterline, more of an eye level. They want a strategic partner, right? We hear from agencies all the time that, gosh, I wish our clients would treat us like strategic partners as opposed to a vendor. I'm telling you, that starts in the help me understand. This is your opportunity to show up and build trust right from the very first conversation. And when you have a conversation like this, when you act like this, and you talk like this, and you're asking smart, intelligent questions about their business, you are earning a seat at the strategic table. But when you step into a conversation and you're asking about budget and approval and timelines, you're showing up like a vendor right from the very beginning, and that does not set the stage. That does not earn you a strategic seat at the table going forward. Discovery calls equal vendor status. Help me understand, seat at the strategic table. Okay, so you've seen the framework, but I also want to share this with you too. So if you go to LinkedIn, if you send me a message on LinkedIn with the keyword trust, we're going to share with you, let's call it our help me understanding kind of trust building kit. You're going to get several, of course I'm biased, several really cool things in that. So we're going to share our help me understand ebook. You can have that for free. We're going to give you the framework that I'm showing with you or walking you through right now. I'm going to give you the framework. And then also we have a brand new diagnostic. We call it the first meeting assessment. So you're going to get all three of those. So let's go back to here. Let's go back to the help me understand. And I'm going to show you an example of one that's completed. So first, when we're going through this process, when I'm working with one of Predictive's prospective clients, an agency that is considering joining us and giving us that privilege and honor to work alongside them and their team to help them move from guesswork to growth and reach their goals faster, install the biz dev engine into their agency. We work through the help me understand, like I mentioned, and then this is what a completed one looks like as we're going through the process. Now, here's how I do this visually. So we obviously start off with a blank version of help me understand. I share that at the beginning, that I'm going to be then taking notes. And then as I'm going through this, as we're going through the session and the prospective client, the agency leader or owner is sharing their insights and so forth along the way, I'm adding it to the framework during the session, live during the session. And I'm doing that for my own note keeping, because then I'm going to share that with my team as we move further through the trust architecture. But then also I'm showing our prospective client that what they're sharing with me is so valuable that I'm actually taking notes that they can see. And I'm doing that, one, because capturing the notes is important for the team, but I could also give our team just the recording and the transcript and so forth to get briefed on the conversation. But I'm also doing that because I learned a very important skill back in 1992, kind of dating myself here, when I read this book, Guerrilla Selling. If this is not part of your sales library, I would highly encourage you. You can get it off of Amazon for like a couple dollars. It is phenomenal. And so in the very beginning, in fact, I think it's like in the first maybe chapter or two, there's a scenario where the guerrilla salesperson goes and meets their prospect. And during that conversation, the very first thing that the guerrilla salesperson says to the prospect is, "Oh gosh, what you're saying sounds really important. Is it okay if I take notes?" And the prospect says, "Yeah, of course, it's totally fine if you take notes." I do a similar thing going through the help me understand because it establishes trust. You might think that it sounds a little bit silly, that little exchange back and forth, but I promise those couple of sentences changes the dynamic. "Oh, Sarah, what you're saying sounds really, really important. Is it okay if I take notes?" "Well, yeah, that's totally fine." "Great. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to capture it here." And then you share the framework. And then as we're going through the conversation and as the framework is getting more and more filled out, I'm consistently going back and forth between the framework and full screen, back and forth to framework to full screen, because it shows how many additional insights are being captured and how important that is. Okay. So again, LinkedIn, send me a message, trust, going to send you the whole thing. Okay. Going to send you the framework, the ebook. Let's go back to the blank version of the framework, and let's go maybe take an even higher level view of this. I broke down the 5 categories, but I want to also show you just kind of a quick visual here. This is how these 5 pieces in this over here, this left, this is where you're demonstrating your knowledge of their niche, their industry. You're sincerely interested in how they do the work that they do, and the problems that it solves, and the business issues that they're leaning into. Why is that important? Because you need to be able to understand, like, can you truly help them, right? Can you truly help them solve the problem that they're struggling with? And then that sets up the great context for the middle column. This column here is where you're talking about the vital priorities, the top 3 most vital priorities between now and the end of the year, or insert a different timeline. That is incredibly important. The vital priorities that they're trying to accomplish between now and insert timeline, because they're again between column 1, that first column about what they do, who they serve, and so forth. Then now, more specifically, you're taking that and narrowing that into, okay, we've had a broader business conversation, left column, to now middle column, getting very specific about what that leader or owner of your prospective client wants to accomplish, being able to crystallize it, 1, 2, and 3. And then beneath that, what are the roadblocks? What are the things standing in their way, right? So between current state, roadblocks, future state, where they want to be, vital priorities, you are the bridge that connects those two. You and your team can then be that bridge that connects those two. So when you can have an open, candid, transparent conversation without any pitching, after you have that conversation, you've gone above the waterline, below the waterline, and you've asked good strategic questions, and you've shown yourself as being a potential strategic partner, not a vendor who just wants to do discovery calls. What you've done there is you've established a base of trust, and you've earned the opportunity to move to the next stage of the trust architecture. The next stage in the trust architecture is align and prescribe. And this is what you do. It's you schedule the meeting before you leave this current meeting. And so by doing that, you thank your prospective client for their time, and then say, if you found this conversation to be helpful, here's what I would like to suggest, and I would like your permission. May I please have your permission to email you some days and times where we can compare calendars in order to schedule what we call the align and prescribe. And so I'm just going to kind of give you sort of the script that I use here at Predictive. And I would say something like, "Hey, Sally, thanks very much for this conversation. This was awesome. I hope that you found it helpful too. Was it helpful?" And then Sally will hopefully say, "Yeah, this was really great. Awesome. May I please have your permission to email you some days and times that we could schedule the next conversation in our process. We call that align and prescribe. And that's where we're going to work through a diagnostic that we call the focus finder. And I'd like to invite one of my business partners. I would like to invite Hannah Roth. She's our Chief Strategy Officer. And like I said, one of the 3 partners here at Predictive ROI. So Hannah, Eric, and I own the business together. And so if it's okay with you, I would love to invite you to our Align and Prescribe, and then also invite Hannah so that she can join us, and then we can work through the focus finder together. Would that be okay? And then Sally would normally say, sure, that sounds great. Awesome. So then I will email those options as we compare calendars in email. So then I'm stepping out of the help me understand. I'm going to get the briefing together. I'm going to provide that to Hannah. I'm going to send the thank you to Sally. And what I've done there is I've set up the rest of, again, in full transparency, the trust architecture. When you do that with excellence and you do that at scale, here's what happens. The typical agency describes their sales pipeline as looking like this: dry, dusty. They have no idea where their next new client is going to come from. No idea. But instead, when you start running a process like this, your sales pipeline starts feeling like this. And the reason why it starts feeling like this is because you've moved trust further upstream. And that's what the trust recession is doing. It's forcing you to move trust way upstream. Clients don't trust you when they hire you. They need to trust you before you even know that they're researching you. We're going to get to that piece in a future video about building trust at scale. But once they trust you enough to step into a conversation, you need to treat that with a lot of respect. And the help me understand will help you do that. You follow that process. Okay, I hope that you found that helpful. The help me understand and how it fits into building trust, how it fits into the overall trust architecture, how it really positions you exceptionally well to be a strategic partner, having a seat at your client's table. And it's the complete opposite of how a discovery call really sets you up to be a vendor, which feels like a whole lot of not awesome. So again, if you go to LinkedIn, message me the word trust, we will email you the Help Me Understand framework, the first meeting assessment, as well as then the Help Me Understand ebook. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, onward with gusto.